Hi, welcome to Part of My Frenchie. This is me, 143. If you don't have a friend, you have one now. So, welcome to this week's edition. Um, I was looking online at some of the topics floating around with regards to pet loss this week. And I belong to quite a few groups, pet loss support groups and Rainbow Bridge groups. There is always a great deal of loss every day. And it's hard. I'll be very honest. It is very, very hard to go through these chats and see the amount of people that lose pets daily. And some would wonder, why, if you don't have a pet that you've lost, why would you participate, and belong to something, or pages like that? And I guess the short answer is because, I can direct them to this channel, or maybe I can offer some comfort to people that are in situations like that, because I've been there. And when I say I can direct them to this channel, it's not necessarily for subscribers. It's more for, letting them know that there's a community out there of people that can help them. And, getting subscribers are nice, which, that's a nice thing. But more importantly, it's getting people help, and it's making people feel comfortable, or making people feel like, I hate to use the word, I always hate to use the word normal, but some of these people, when you scroll through, Koki's being very vocal today. But a lot of these people, this is the first time they've ever been through something like this. And, they got their, they have gotten their animals, 10, 12 years ago. And this is the first time they've, faced a lot. They face a loss. And, that's hard. That's hard. That's devastating. One post I just read before I came on today, the one young lady just got the ashes back of her beloved dog. And, she was saying in the chat, she was hurting so bad mentally. She was, crying out for help in this post, saying, can anybody help me? And you can almost picture it. You can almost picture this poor young lady being at her house and, looking at this box and nobody there. Nobody there, that she can go to. And unlike, people counselors, where, those are a dime a dozen. You can pick up a phone and call a people counselor, and get help. Pet loss support counselors aren't out there. And, again, I've said this before in my videos. People counselors and pet grief counselors are not the same. And, they can argue it all day long. And I don't feel that they're the same. They're pet grief and people grief. The stages of grief are the same. Let me put it that way. You go through the same stages of grief that you do for, any grief, whether you lose a person, whether you lose a dog, a cat, fish, whether you lose a dog, any kind of loss in your life, you go through the same stages of grief. Now, depending on what you've lost, that is a that's a different kind of healing. And that's where I say that it's different when you go to a people therapist compared to somebody that specializes in pet loss and grief. When you go to a counselor for you know, maybe if you've lost your husband or God forbid a child, something like that, they are going to teach you, or they're going to help you grieve something completely different than if you've lost your family pet. Um, you know, when I talk to people on, you know, losing their family pet, or if I you know, talk to children when they lose their family pet, you know, it would be nothing like I would talk to somebody if they've lost their child, or they've lost their husband or sister or things like that. That's why I'm saying there's a difference. And I've known people that have gone to regular therapists for the loss of their animals, and they do not get the same healing that they do from going to a pet grief counselor. And um, and that's okay. I mean, like I said, it's nothing. It's nothing. You know, it's. I have nothing negative to say about regular therapists, psychologists. I think they're wonderful people. Absolutely wonderful. Nothing negative at all. I just think that if you're going to seek help for, you know, things like that, you know, I would look for somebody that specializes in pet grief. It's just different. It's just a little bit different, tailored differently. Um, so again, that's why I love this channel. We tackle things like that. We tackle pet loss and grief, and we also share stories about pet loss and grief. And we do it in order to help people, in order to get people to understand that it's normal. And so, like I said, the young lady that was just in the feed that I just read, you know, she was crying out for help because it, again, pet loss is such a lonely, isolating area and situation, because the relationship that you have with your pet is so intimate on a lot of levels, because really, when you look at it, when you look at the dynamic between you and your pet, nobody else has that dynamic. Um, you know, besides maybe you and your family member, you know, nobody else has a dynamic between myself and Rosie, or myself and Coco, and even, you know, the people in my household, you know, even, you know, my son or my daughter, you know, they don't have the same kind of relationship that I do with this dog. They have their own relationship with the dog, but I have my own. And, you know, even with my other dogs that have passed, I had my own special bond with those dogs. And maybe they had closer bonds with some of the other dogs than I did. And so, again, that's what I'm talking about. Some of the relationships and some of the bonds were stronger, were tighter, which makes the grieving process sometimes harder, which makes it longer, um, take time, longer to heal, longer to process. Um, Many times you'll go through the stages over and over again. Many times you may get stuck in one of the stages a little bit more, where you need more time to process. And but that's where, you know, you start getting into the gray areas when it comes to pet loss and grief. So when, you know, and honestly, her question, or actually her statement on saying that she needed help, and she felt lonely, that was one of several that I had seen over, you know, the past month, of people just basically crying out because of they, you know, they've lost a pet, and, you know, they're just, it's a helpless feeling. It is an honestly, it's honestly a helpless feeling. Um, because again, if it's your first time going through it, you know, if it's your first time going through it, there's doubt, there's fear, especially if you have to go through euthanasia. You know, let's face it, we are responsible for these creatures. Everything that we do, we are responsible for these creatures. We're responsible for their health. We're responsible to make sure that they're being fed, that they're taken care of. And even at the end of their life, I don't care if they're, 15, 16, 17 years old, and we know that, you know, it's just, they're ready, they're ready to go. And it's the right thing to do. We are still going to question whether we're making the right decision or not, even though we know deep down in our hearts it's the right decision, because we're responsible for that. We're responsible for that pet. So, like I said, it's one of those things where it's just, there's so many things, because again, it's just a different type of relationship. So that's one of the things that I wanted to cover, like I said, because I had just seen that post, and this poor young lady was just wanting some sort of comfort that somebody out there understood how she felt. And I want her to know, if she sees this, that there's a whole community of people that know how you feel. There's a whole community of people that have been where you've been, that have sat where you've sat, that have made that decision, or have had to make that decision that you've had to make, that have had to wait the few days and then go and pick up that box and take it home, and then go through the grieving process all over again. You're not alone. You're not alone in your feelings. So know that there's a whole community of people that understand how you feel. You're not alone. So I hope that brings you some sort of comfort. And until next time, if you don't have a friend, you have one now. Hit that like and subscribe button. Thanks for stopping by. Pardon my Frenchie. This is me, 143. Take care. Bye-bye.